What's going on, everybody? I hope you're all well, and welcome back to Dragon Age Origins. Once again, this is not a main episode of the Let's Play series. This is a follow-up Codex episode where I'm going to read the lore, dive into the world, and give my thoughts on it if I have any. So if you're not interested in that, click away now and wait until the next major episode. If you are, let's jump into it. We got a lot of codexes here, it seems, and I came prepared with coffee, so let's read a little, shall we? So, Duke. The Mabari is clever enough to speak, and wise enough to know not to. That's a Ferelden proverb. Apparition's War Hound has a pedigree older than Highever, and a penchant for driving cooks to distraction. We already read Duncan and Rend and How. Cultures and history. Now this is where a lot of stuff is going to be. I believe we read Ferelden Chapter 1 yesterday. Actually, I'm not sure. Let's read it again. Ferelden, as we think of it now, did not exist before the Exalted Age. Instead, the valley was divided up into dozens of old Alamari clans. They warred constantly with one another over land, honor, the allegiance of the freeholders, and, on one notable occasion, the name given to a favorite Mabari. And then, in the 33rd year of the Exalted Age, Calenhad Therin became Turn of Denerim, and everything changed. Most of what we know about the founding of our nation comes from old songs that the bards passed down through the ages. The songs are filled with wild exaggerations and outright lies, but this hardly differs from the scholarly papers of some of my contemporaries. There is no agreement among poets or scholars on how he did it, but Callan had gained the support of the Circle of Magi, and they crafted for him a suit of silvery white armor that, by all accounts, repelled both arrow and blade. Callan had led his army across the valley and captured Redcliffe, one of only 3 men who ever successfully laid siege to that fortress, and presented himself to the bands of the Landsmeet as their king. So he had magical plate mail. He had the cheat code. The poets tell us that every lord knelt before Calenhad without question. The fact that he attended the Landsmeet surrounded by ash warriors and loyal mages of the Circle is generally omitted from the ballads, however. So he rolled in with backup. It was kind of a Neil or Dracarys kind of situation. From Calenhad came the line of Therin kings and queens who reigned uninterrupted until the 44th year of the Blessed Age, when the Orlesian invasion came. The rightful king was forced to flee Denerim, and for 70 years a puppet sat upon the throne. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. So that's a little on how Ferelden got started. It was warring clans at first, united by one badass warrior with magical plate mail. It's interesting. Also interesting that he just forced the Landsmeet to kneel. Kind of a convert or burn situation. History of Ferelden, Chapter 2. The occupation was a dark blot on Ferelden's history. Our people, who from time memorial valued their freedom over all else, were forced to bow to Orlesian rule. The Empire declared our elves property and sold them like cattle. Chevaliers routinely plundered freeholds of coin, food, and even women and children, and excused it as taxation. And for 70 years no Landsmeets were held, for the imperial throne had declared our ancient laws a form of treason. So basically a foreign land came in and occupied, raped the wives and children, pillaged the land, took away all the beliefs of the native peoples. Thank God they didn't manage to keep their occupation. It is important to know all the things the Orlesians did here. Like I said, it's going to take a big effect into certain characters' opinions in this game. The Orlesian occupation is very important to understand motivations in like the political climate of this world. King Brandel was one of those who escaped. He tried to organize the other fugitive lords to retake their land, but Brandel was neither clever nor persuasive, and the nobles preferred to take their chances alone. Ferelden might still be little more than a territory of the Empire were it not for the fact that his daughter had all the charisma that her royal father lacked. The Rebel Queen's rule began with a midnight attack on the Imperial Armory at Lotharin. It was swift and successful, and with their pilfered arms, the rebels began a campaign against the Orlesians in earnest. But the turning point of the war came when a young freeholder joined the Queen's army. The lad, Loghain MacTeer, possessed a remarkable talent for strategy, and quickly became the favorite advisor of young Prince Marek. The queen finally died at the hands of Orlesian sympathizers anxious to curry favor with their painted masters, and Marek took her place as the leader of the rebellion. Lurgain became Marek's right hand. Marek and Lurgain led the rebels in a new campaign against their Orlesian oppressors, culminating in the Battle of Riverdane, where the last Chevaliers in Denerim were crushed. With the capital once more in the hands of Fereldans, the battle to free our people was finally over, but the battle to rebuild what had been lost had only just begun. From Ferelden Folklore and History by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. Interesting. So if she hadn't have died to sympathizers, Marek and Lorgain would not have had their rise to power the way that they did. What else do we have? Culture of Ferelden. The Fereldans are a puzzle. As a people, they are one bad day away from reverting to barbarism. They repelled invasions from Tevinter during the height of the Imperium with nothing but dogs and their own obstinate disposition. The North remembers. They are the coarse, willful, dirty, disorganized people who somehow gave rise to our prophet, ushered in an era of enlightenment, and toppled the greatest empire in history. There are few things you can assume safely in dealing with these people. First, they value loyalty above all things, beyond wealth, beyond power, beyond reason. Second, although they have nothing in their entire country which you are likely to think at all remarkable, they are extremely proud of their accomplishments. Third, if you insult their dogs, they are likely to declare war. They're the best boys. And finally, the surest sign that you have underestimated the Fereldans is that you think you have come to understand them. Empress Celine I of Orlais, in a letter to her newly appointed ambassador to Denerim. So Fereldans are a very proud, hardy people. They've repelled invasions, poor, hard, honest working people. I love Ferelden. They have such a rich history and culture, and they love dogs. The Fereldans are my favorite faction in the entirety of Thedas. Dogs in Ferelden. I am frequently asked, during my travels in other lands, to explain the dogs omnipresent in Ferelden. Inevitably, I tell my foreign questioners that there are no more dogs in my homeland than in their own. In every civilized corner of Thedas, an astute observer will notice dogs employed in hunting game, keeping barns and storehouses free of vermin, herding livestock, guarding homes, and even used as beasts of burden in the mountains. It is simply that Fereldans show appreciation for the work that our dogs do, and perhaps the reason for that is tangled up in mythology. Hafthor, the first man to be named Tern, the hero who united our Alamari ancestors to drive back the Darkspawn of the Second Blight, was reputed to be the son of a werewolf. Now, perhaps this was meant to be some comment on his temperament, or simply a way of making a great man even larger than life. But more than half the noble families of Ferelden claim to be descendants of Hafthor, and consequently, many of our old people believe they have some distant kinship with wolves. It is only good manners to be polite to one's kin. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitive. We will actually meet Genitive later, so that's cool we read something by him. But that is why Mabari and things like that are so lauded in this culture. It's because the man who united it all was believed to be part werewolf. Kind of like descendants of each other, I guess. Like he said, it's only good manners to be polite to one's kin. Geography of Ferelden. Let me take a sip of coffee here. The Kingdom of Ferelden is the southernmost civilized nation in Thedas, although some scholars dispute that claim to civilization. It is perhaps the most physically isolated of all the kingdoms of Thedas. To the east is the Amaranthine Ocean, to the north the Waking Sea, and to the south the Kokari Wilds, which in the summer months are a vast peat bog, and in the winter become a treacherous labyrinth of iced-over waterways. The Frostback Mountains guard the western border, and only a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea allows travel between Ferelden and Orlais. Most of the land in the central portion of the kingdom, called the Banorn, is open plains. These are crossed by the remnants of ancient Tevinter highway that once connected Valrayo with Ostagar. Valrayo is the capital of Orlais, I believe, on the edge of the Kokari Wilds. The western part of Ferelden is dominated by Lake Calenhad, a huge caldera filled by the runoff of glaciers from nearby mountains. Lake Calenhad is home to the famed Fortress of Redcliffe, as well as the Circle Tower, which houses Ferelden's Circle of Magi. In the east is the vast Brazilian forest, which the superstitious locals profess to be haunted. and from which rises the Dragon's Peak, a solitary mountain that guards the capital city of Denerim. That's a quick little layout of the world there. It's like reading a map, essentially. We'll go to most of those places in this game, so it's cool to hear about them this early. Politics of Ferelden. To our neighbors, Ferelden seems utterly chaotic. Unlike other monarchies, power does not descend from our throne. Rather, it rises from the support of the freeholders. Each freehold chooses the ban or all to whom it pays allegiance. Typically, this choice is based on proximity of the freehold to the lord's castle, as it's worthless to pay for the upkeep of soldiers who will arrive at your land too late to defend it. For the most part, each generation of freeholders casts its lot with the same ban as their fathers did, but things can and do change. No formal oaths are sworn, and it is not unheard of, especially in prickly central Banorn, for bans to court freeholders away from their neighbors, a practice which inevitably begets feuds that last for ages. Yeah, I imagine that gets you seen as a traitor pretty quickly. Turns arose from amongst the bands, war leaders who, in antiquity, had grown powerful enough to move other bands to swear fealty to them. There were many turns in the days before King Calenhad, but he succeeded in whittling them down to only two, Gwaren in the south, Iever in the north. These turns still hold the oaths of bands and alls who they may call upon in the event of war or disaster, and similarly, the turns still hold responsibility for defending those sworn to them. The alls were established by the turns, given command of strategic fortresses that could not be overseen by the turns themselves. Unlike the turns, the alls have no bands sworn to them, and are simply somewhat more prestigious bands. The king is, in essence, the most powerful of the turns. Although Denerim was originally the tenir of the king, it has since been reduced to an arlin, as the king's domain is now all of Ferelden. But even the king's power must come from the bands. Nowhere is this more evident than during the Landsmeet, an annual council for which all the nobles of Ferelden gather, held for almost 3,000 years except odd interruptions during blights and invasions. The side of a king asking for and working to win the support of lesser men is a source of constant wonder to foreign ambassadors. For the people, by the people. We like that. We did read, however. Now we read The Noble Families of Ferelden. Take another sip of coffee. The occupation left empty castles in its wake. All families were butchered in the initial invasion, and all those who couldn't or wouldn't bend the knee to the Emperor's puppet king were declared traitors and hunted. Many bloodlines ended on chevaliers' blades at dusty crossroads, in forest clearings, or in freeholds. And then there were the turncoats. To curry favor with their new masters, some nobles took up arms against their brothers. They betrayed and murdered the rebel queen, an act that created even more vacant titles and lands once King Marek exacted justice. Traitors. Ironically, there is always traitors that think their foreign masters would serve them better than the homeland where their ancestors are from, and it seems like they got what they had coming to them at the end of all this. That Ferelden did not fall apart after the Orlesians left is a testament to the strength of King Marek. The old families still held grudges against those who had sided with the Emperor, and those new families that had been granted titles were viewed as interlopers. The Landsmeet that followed Marek's coronation were tense, to say the least. Folklore and History by Sister Petrine. Yeah, I imagine they were a little tense. Sitting with the new kids on the block and people who betrayed your cousins, broke their oaths. Surprised they didn't end in a bloodbath. The Grey Wardens. The First Blight had already raged for 90 years. The world was in chaos. A god had risen, twisted and corrupted. The remaining gods of Tevinter were silent, withdrawn. What writing we have covered from those times is filled with despair. For everyone believed, from the greatest archons to the lowliest slaves, that the world was coming to an end. At Weishaupt Fortress in the desolate Anderfels, a meeting transpired. Soldiers of the Imperium, seasoned veterans who had known nothing their entire lifetime except hopeless war, came together. When they left Weishaupt, they had renounced their oaths to the Imperium. They were soldiers no longer. They were the Grey Wardens. The Wardens began an aggressive campaign against the Blight, striking back against the Darkspawn, reclaiming lands given up for lost. The Blight was far from over, but their victories brought notice, and soon they received aid from every nation in Thedas. They grew in number as well as reputation. Finally, in the year 992 of the Tevinter Imperium, upon the Silent Plains, they met the archdemon Dumat in battle. A third of all armies in northern Thedas were lost to the fighting, but Dumat fell and the Darkspawn fled back underground. Even that was not the end. The Imperium once revered 7 gods: Dumat, Zazikal, Toth, Andoril, Rezikal, Luskan, and Earthemiel. 4 have risen as archdemons. The Grey Wardens have kept watch through the ages, well aware that peace is fleeting, and that their war continues until the last of the dragon gods is gone. So essentially, the Grey Warden Order started from a group of warriors that were born into this bloodbath of the First Blight. And they did whatever they did inside Weishaupt, which is now the main fortress of the Wardens. Weishaupt Fortress is home base for the Wardens. That's all the way over in the Anderfels. And then they dedicated their lives then and there. A third of the entire world's armies fell during this battle. That is a hell of a fight. That's a lot of lives lost. And as I said here, so there are 4 archdemons that have risen, which means what? There's 3 left? Grey Wardens will be needed until the last dragon falls, because the way the Blight works is the Darkspawn search in the underground tunnels and the deep roads for the old dragon gods, and when they find one, they corrupt it with the Blight, and then the dragon launches them into the invasion of the world as their leader. 160. Darkspawn. Those who had sought to claim heaven by violence destroyed it. What was golden and pure turned black. Those who had once been mage lords, the brightest of their age, were no longer men, but monsters. Therenides 12:1. Thin was the midwife that ushered the Darkspawn into this world. The Magisters fell from the Golden City, and their fate encompassed all our worlds, but they were not alone. No one knows where the Darkspawn come from. A dark mockery of men. In the darkest places they thrive, growing in numbers as a plague of locusts will. In raids, they will often take captives, dragging their victims alive into the deep roads, but most evidence suggests that these are eaten. Like spiders, it seems Darkspawn prefer their food still breathing. Perhaps they are simply spawned by the darkness. Certainly, we know that evil has no trouble perpetuating itself. The last Blight was in the Age of Towers, striking once again at the heart of Tevinter, spreading south into Orlais and east into the Free Marches. The plague spread as far as Ferelden, but the withering and twisting of the land stopped well beyond our borders. Here, Darkspawn have never been more than stuff of legends. In the northern lands, however, particularly Tevinter and the Anderfels, they say Darkspawn haunt the hinterlands, preying on outlying farmers and isolated villages, a constant threat. From Ferelden, Folklore and History by Sister Patrine. The fact that Ferelden seems to judge the Darkspawn as legends and they've never really had to deal with it that much would explain why they were so quick to kick the to kick the Wardens out of Ferelden, which was definitely a mistake. I am Team Warden if you haven't noticed. But that does explain why they so nonchalantly evicted them from Ferelden. Like, we don't need you. Blight's a thing of the past, which is going to come to bite them in the ass. It mentioned the withering of land too, something we'll see as this game progresses, but the presence of a Darkspawn horde poisons the land itself. Like, they literally destroy the earth that they walk on. Crops rot, the ground becomes unfarmable, everything dies and withers. There's blight sickness, where human proximity to Darkspawn, you just become sick. It's almost like it gives you a cancer. There's a lot of bad things about the blight. It's not just monsters that attack you with swords. They poison everything they come in contact with. Okay, so creatures. Mabari War Hound. Dogs are an essential part of Ferelden culture, and no dog is more prized than the Mabari. The breed is as old as myth, said to have been bred from the wolves who served Dane. Prized for their intelligence and loyalty, these dogs are more than mere weapons or status symbols. The hounds chose their masters, and pair with them for life. To be the master of a Mabari anywhere in Ferelden is to be recognized instantly as a person of worth. The Mabari are an essential part of Ferelden military strategy. Trained hounds can easily pull knights from horseback or break lines of pikemen, and the sight and sound of a wave of war dogs howling and snarling has been known to cause panic amongst even the most hardened infantry soldiers. Rats. What are you, mad? Even the most giant of rats isn't going to present that much of a problem to anyone larger than a cat. Even the stories in the archives that tell of blight-touched rats still only attributed them with the ability to spread the plague. The rats themselves got no larger than perhaps 3 feet in length, covered in sharp, bony spikes and boils. Disturbing, certainly, but dangerous? This is no fantasy conjured by madmen, young man. You have much more important creatures to concern yourself with. Transcript of a lecture given by Nalia, senior enchanter of Hosberg, 844 blessed. It's interesting, like it says here, that just the fact that you own a Mabari and you have trained it and earned its loyalty shows you instantly as a person of worth. We already noticed the way that people are kind of talking about our Mabari, for example. It's a big sign of cultural importance for Fereldans. Dog lords, as other people call them. Magic and religion. Andraste, bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the markets of Minrathous, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Alamari warlord. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true God did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband, Mafarath, and told him that all the Maker had revealed to her. Together, they rallied the Alamari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself, fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until there were a vast tide washing over the Imperium, and when Mafarath saw the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last, the armies of Andraste and Mafarath stood before the very gates of Minrathous, but Andraste was not with them, for Mafarath had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Tevinter. For this, the Archon would give Mafarath all the lands to the south of the Waking Sea. So he got jealous that she had become bigger than him, and that she had the devotion of the people, and so he turned cold and turned her in. And jealousy and pride is the root of all sin, as they say. And so, before all the armies of the Alamari and Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword, and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Mafarath, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him. And Our Lady sits still at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children, from the sermons of Justinian II. That is an interesting, that is basically, this codex is the beginning of the Chantry, essentially. This is where it comes from. All the religion you're going to hear about in this game is from this specific story. The fall of Andraste and the Maker, and how the jealousy and pride of Mafarath basically doomed the world to God turning his back on them. The Chant of Light, the Blight. No matter their power, their triumphs, the mage lords of Tevinter were men, and doomed to die. And a voice whispered within their hearts, "Shall you surrender your power? To time like beasts of the fields. You are lords of the earth. Go forth to claim the empty throne of heaven and be gods." In secret they worked, magic upon magic, all their power and all their vanity. They turned against the veil, until at last it gave way. Above them, a river of light. Before them, the throne of heaven, waiting beneath their feet. The footprints of the Maker, and all around them echoed a vast silence. But when they took a single step towards the empty throne, a great voice cried out, shaking the very foundations of heaven and earth. And so is the golden city blackened with each step you take in my hall. Marvel at perfection, for it is fleeting. You have brought sin to heaven, and doom upon all the world. Violently they were cast down, for no mortal may walk bodily in the realm of dreams, bearing the mark of their crime, bodies so maimed and distorted that none should see them and know them for men. Deep into the earth they fled, away from the light. In darkness eternal they searched for those who had goaded them on, until at last they found their prize, their god, their betrayer, the sleeping dragon Dumas. Their taint twisted even the false god, and the whisperer awoke at last, in pain and horror, and led them to wreak havoc upon all the nations of the world. The First Blight. So basically Dumas, the whisperer as they call him, goaded the Magisters into breaking into the Fade and trying to take heaven. They were cast down and blighted with the Taint, and then they searched for their god in the deep roads, and they found him, tainted him, which led to the First Blight. The commandments of the Maker. These truths the Maker has revealed to me. As there is but one world, one life, one death, there is but one God, and he is our Maker. They are sinners who have given their love to false gods. Magic exists to serve man, and never to rule over him. That is a very important line that you're going to hear a lot in these games, actually. Foul and corrupt are they who have taken his gift and turned it against his children. They shall be named Maleficar, accursed ones. They shall find no rest in this world or beyond. All men are the work of our Maker's hands, from the lowest slaves to the highest kings. Those who bring harm without provocation to the least of his children are hated and accursed by the Maker. Those who bear false witness and work to deceive others know this: there is but one truth. All things are known to our Maker, and he shall judge their lies. All things in this world are finite. What one man gains, another has lost. To those who steal from their brothers and sisters, do harm to their livelihood and to their peace of mind, our Maker sees this with a heavy heart. Transfigurations 1:15. It's kind of the 10 Commandments of Dragon Age. The Maker. There was no word for heaven or for earth, or sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be, dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. And from it made his firstborn, and he said to them, in my image I forge you. To you I give dominion over all that exists, but by your will may all things be done. Then, in the center of heaven he called forth, a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne, and sang hymns of praise unending, but their songs were the songs of cobblestones. They shone with the golden light reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the Fade, saying, in my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will are things done. Yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever-changing. And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the Fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, here I decree opposition in all things, for earth, sky, for winter, summer, for darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world given new life. And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable, as the substance of earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, to you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the Fade I crafted you, and to the Fade you shall return, each night in dreams, that you may always remember me. And then the Maker sealed the gates of the Golden City, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Serenities 518. I love this line. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame. I love the way that that sounds. Very cool. Very, very cool. I think that is it for codexes. I think we're all caught up. We are. That was fun. I feel like we touched on some good stuff though. This episode ran longer than I expected. I didn't think I'd have that many codexes, but hey ho. Well guys, that's gonna be a wrap for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, please comment and subscribe. If you have any comments or wanna give me any of your opinions about what we just discussed, leave it down below. Otherwise, stay tuned and I'll see you soon with more Dragon Age Origins. Have a good day, guys.